Her blood is a biological weapon. A single drop can scorch the skin of any werewolf who touches it. Isolated since childhood in a stone cell, she was her pack, most dangerous secret. Then the Alpha King conquered her territory. He found her, reached for her hand, and her toxic blood seared his flesh. He didn't flinch. He didn't let go, because the mate bond overrides even this. For 17 years, the Silver Fang Pack weaponized her condition, drawing her blood to poison their enemies and keeping her locked away as their greatest asset and deepest shame. She is Ilara, the toxic Omega. But when the brutal Alpha King, Kashan, annihilates her pack in a single night, he finds their secret weapon in a dungeon. Now, with a touch that should have burned him to the bone, he claims her as his fated mate. Can a bond written in the stars survive a body designed to destroy it? Ilara's story began not with a birth, but with a biological anomaly. In the winter of 2004, in a remote mountain clinic in Wyoming, a baby girl was born to two low-ranking members of the Silver Fang Pack. She was named Ilara, and from her very first breath, she was different. Her skin carried a faint, persistent warmth. Her cries, when she was distressed, would cause the skin of the nurses who held her to redden and blister as if touched by a hot iron. The pack healers were baffled. It wasn't until her first shift at age 13 that the true horror manifested. During the painful transformation, a single drop of her blood fell onto the stone floor of the ritual chamber. It sizzled and smoked, eating through the rock like acid. The attending elder, who had cut his hand during the ceremony, accidentally touched the spot. The skin of his fingers peeled away in seconds, down to the bone. The Silver Fang Pack was not a wealthy or powerful clan. They controlled a modest territory in the Wind River Range, surviving on mining leases and meager tourism. To their ambitious and ruthless alpha, Gregor, Ilara was not a child with a disease. She was a strategic miracle. He immediately isolated her. Her parents, terrified and obedient, were moved to a distant outpost and told their daughter had been taken to a special facility for treatment. That was the last they saw of her. For Ilara, childhood ended that day. She was taken to the deepest sublevel of the Pack's mountain stronghold, to a chamber carved from solid granite. The room was 10 by 10 feet. It contained a stone slab for a bed, a drain in the center of the floor, and a heavy iron door with a narrow slot for food. There were no windows. The only light came from a single, flickering fluorescent bulb behind a thick plastic shield. The walls were scorched in places, testament to her early, uncontrollable outbursts. Her world became the smell of damp stone, the chill of the mountain's heart, and the constant, humming fear of her own body. Gregor's weaponization program began immediately. He called it Project Cinder. Once a month, under heavy guard, Ilara was restrained with thick leather bindings lined with lead, the only material they found that could briefly contain the corrosive effect. A pack doctor, wearing a full hazardous materials suit, would insert a needle into a vein in her arm and draw a single vial of her blood. The process was agonizing. Her blood, reacting to the stress and the foreign object, would grow hotter, sometimes melting the glass of the collection vial. The doctor would then quickly transfer the precious, toxic liquid into a specially crafted ceramic ampule. One vial, diluted and applied to arrowheads or blade edges, could incapacitate an alpha for hours. 2 vials could kill. For the Silver Fang Pack, it was a game changer. They used Ilara's blood to settle territorial disputes, to enforce tribute from smaller packs, and to guard their borders. They became untouchable, and Ilara became their most valuable and most imprisoned asset. But weapons require maintenance. Gregor soon discovered that Ilara's condition was tied to her emotional state. Fear, anger, and despair made her blood more volatile and more potent, so a cruel psychological regimen was implemented. She was denied all comforts. She was given only the bare minimum of nutrition. She was spoken to only in commands. Once, when she was 15, a young, empathetic guard named Leo tried to smuggle her a book. He slipped a paperback novel through the food slot. For 3 days, Ilara lived in the worlds of Jane Eyre and Elizabeth Bennet. It was the greatest kindness she had ever known. When Gregor found out, he had Leaf stripped of his rank and banished to the frozen northern border. Then he made Ilara watch through the slot in her door as they burned the book in the corridor outside her cell. The message was clear. Connection was a liability. Isolation was control. Her value was in her pain. For 17 years, this was Ilara's existence. She knew the pack by the sounds of their boots in the hall and the scent of their fear when they handled her product. She knew the changing seasons only by the slight variation in the chill of the stone. Her only companion was her own wolf, a subdued, mournful presence in her mind that she had never been allowed to set free. She was the ghost in the machine of the Silver Fang's rise. Until the night the machine broke. The attack came without warning. It was a moonless night in late October. Ilara first knew something was wrong when the usual rhythm of the pack house above her changed. The steady cadence of patrols became a panicked sprint. Shouts echoed down the ventilation shaft. Then came the sounds she had only imagined, the roar of challengers, the snarls of wolves fighting, the screams of the dying, and the unmistakable, earth-shaking tremors of an alpha unleashing his full power. The battle for the Silver Fang stronghold lasted less than an hour. The final sound she heard was the screech of tearing metal as the main gate was ripped from its hinges. Then silence, a heavy, waiting silence. 2 hours later, new footsteps approached her door. They were not the hurried, fearful steps of Silver Fang guards. These were slow, deliberate, and powerful. The lock on her iron door, a complex mechanism of steel and magic, was shattered with a single, deafening blow. The door swung inward. Framed in the dim light of the corridor stood a man who seemed to absorb all the shadows. He was massive, broad-shouldered, wearing battle-scarred leather armor. This was Cashen, the Alpha King. He had conquered 3 territories in as many years, and the Silver Fang Pack, with its mysterious, unbeatable weapon, had been a thorn in his side for too long. His intelligence had been vague talk of a secret weapon, a poison. He had expected a lab, a stockpile, not this. His golden eyes adjusted to the gloom, taking in the barren stone cell, the drain in the floor, the pathetic stone slab. And then he saw her. Ilara was huddled in the farthest corner, her threadbare grey shift hanging off her thin frame, her long light brown hair matted. She was shaking, her wrists scarred from countless needle marks, her eyes wide with a terror so profound it was beyond screaming. She held her hands close to her chest, the skin around them glowing with a faint, dangerous red light. Cashen took a step into the room. His beater, a giant named Rohan, moved to stop him. "My king, the air it burns, there's a toxin." Cashen waved him off, his gaze fixed on the terrified young woman. He could smell it now, a sharp, acrid scent like ozone and hot metal. It was coming from her. This was the weapon, not a thing but a person, a living, breathing Omega. His wolf, a dominant, restless beast, did not recoil in warning as it should have. Instead, it stilled. Then it surged forward with a force that knocked the breath from Cashen's body. A single, undeniable word echoed in his soul, mate. Every instinct, every ancient law of their kind roared to life. This broken, toxic girl in a stone cage was his fated other half. The contradiction was impossible. His mind reeled, but his body was already moving, compelled by a bond older than reason. He slowly removed his right gauntlet, letting the heavy leather fall to the floor with a thud that echoed in the silent cell. He took another step, then another, closing the distance. Ilara flinched, pressing herself harder against the stone. "Don't," she whispered, her voice raspy from disuse. "Please, it will hurt you." Cashen didn't speak. His face was a mask of fierce, unreadable determination. He knelt before her, his golden eyes holding hers. And then, with a deliberate slowness that made the moments stretch into eternity, he reached out his bare hand, not to take her blood, not to claim a weapon, but to touch her. His fingertips brushed against the back of her trembling hand. A violent hiss filled the room. Steam erupted where their skin met. The scent of searing flesh, his flesh, cut through the air. Ilara watched in frozen horror as the skin of his palm and fingers blistered and blackened instantly. She waited for the snarl of pain, the recall, the look of revulsion she had seen on every face that had ever come too close. It didn't come. Cashen's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking in his cheek. Pain, raw and shocking, lanced up his arm. But his grip did not loosen. His fingers closed gently around her hand, holding the burning, destructive connection. He didn't flinch, he didn't let go. His eyes never wavered from hers. In that moment, as his flesh burned and her world shattered, Ilara felt something she had never known. A warm, golden thread, fragile but unbreakable, spun itself between their souls. The mate bond had ignited, and it was overriding the agony. In the smoking silence of that stone cell, a biological impossibility had just occurred. The mate bond, a force of primal magic, had momentarily overridden the physical agony of Cashen's burning flesh. But magic is not science, and as the initial shockwave of their connection faded, reality came crashing back in. The pain returned, white-hot and vicious. Cashen's breath hissed through his teeth, but his hold on Ilara's hand remained unbroken. He looked down at the ruin of his palm, the skin blistered and blackened, still sizzling faintly where it met her glowing skin. Behind him, Beta Rohan took a horrified step forward. "My king, your hand, stand down," Cashin growled, the command raw but absolute. He was not looking at his injury. He was looking at her face, at the tears now tracking clean lines through the grime on her cheeks. "You're burning," Ilara whispered, her voice breaking. "You have to let go." "No," Cashin said, the single word final. He had spent his life conquering, building an empire through sheer force and ruthless will. He had never felt anything as fundamentally right as this tether to her soul, even as it seared his body. The contradiction was the point. His mate was not broken. She was powerful, and she was terrified of her own power. That ended now. With immense care, using his other unburned hand, Cashin reached up and cupped the side of her face. His touch was featherlight, avoiding her toxic skin, but the connection of the bond flared again, a warm counterpoint to the cold horror of the cell. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice dropping to a deep, calming rumble. She stared at him, uncomprehending. No one had asked her name in over a decade. "Ilara," she finally breathed. "Ilara," Cashin repeated, as if tasting the word. "I am Cashin. And you are coming with me." He shifted his grip, still holding her burning hand, and stood, drawing her gently to her feet. She stumbled, her legs weak from years of confinement and malnutrition. In one fluid motion, Cashin swept her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Her body was rigid with fear, but the moment her toxic skin touched the leather of his armor, nothing happened. The toxin was neutralized by the treated hide. It was only direct, living flesh-to-flesh contact that triggered the reaction. A critical detail, one that meant she could be touched, could be held, if only through a barrier. The journey out of the Silver Fang stronghold was a blur of surreal imagery for Ilara. Cashin carried her through corridors littered with the defeated. His warriors, a disciplined, silent force in black gear, stood at attention as he passed, their eyes wide with shock at the sight of their king holding a glowing, emaciated Omega. They emerged into the main courtyard under a blanket of cold stars. The air, sharp and clean, was the first fresh breeze Ilara had felt in 17 years. She inhaled deeply and promptly began to choke, her system overwhelmed. Cashin held her tighter. "Breathe, Ilara, just breathe." He moved toward a waiting armored vehicle. His head medic, a severe-looking woman named Dr. Aris, rushed forward, her gaze darting from Cashin's ruined hand to the woman in his arms. "My king, we need to treat that burn immediately, and we need to quarantine her. Our sensors are detecting a potent, unknown biological agent." "She is not a biological agent," Cashin snapped, his aura flaring in a warning wave that made even his seasoned medic flinch. "She is your queen. You will treat her with the same reverence and skill you would treat me. Is that understood?" The medic's eyes widened. "Yes, my king." The convoy sped through the night, away from the conquered territory and toward Cashin's seat of power, the Obsidian Spire, a fortress built into the side of the Grand Tetons. Inside the lead vehicle, Ilara shivered violently, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Cashin sat beside her, his burned hand now bandaged by the medic, who had worked with furious, terrified efficiency. He never took his eyes off Ilara. The bond was a living thing in his chest, a golden cord pulling taut. It sang with her fear, her confusion, her fragile, lingering hope. He could feel it all, and he could feel the raw, agonized power swirling beneath her skin, a storm held in check only by her exhaustion. "Why?" Ilara finally whispered, staring at her own hands, which still pulsed with that faint, dangerous light. "Why didn't you let go?" Cashin turned his whole body toward her, his expression utterly serious. "Because the bond told me not to. But more than that, because you have spent your life being treated as a thing that destroys. I needed you to see, from the first second, that I am a man who endures." Upon arrival at the Obsidian Spire, Cashin bypassed the medical wing entirely. He took Ilara directly to the royal suites. The rooms were the antithesis of her stone cell, expansive, warm, with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the majestic, snow-capped mountains. A fire crackled in a hearth of black slate. He set her down gently on a plush sofa. "This is yours," he said simply. Ilara looked around, her mind unable to process the luxury. "I can't, the floors, the fabrics, I'll ruin them." "Then we will replace them," Cashin stated, as if discussing the weather. "Nothing in this world is more important than your comfort." He then did something that shattered the last of her composure. He knelt before her, ignoring the protest in his injured hand. "Listen to me, Ilara. You are not a weapon. You are my mate. Your condition is a part of you, but it is not all asterisk of you. We will understand it, we will control it, but we will not fear it. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her not with greed or terror, but with unwavering determination. She began to weep, silent, heaving sobs that held 17 years of loneliness. Cashin did not try to touch her. He just knelt there, a solid, immovable presence, letting her break apart in safety. The next morning, the real work began. Cashin assembled his best minds: Dr. Aris, a brilliant but cold geneticist; Kale, an ancient lawmaster who remembered old curses and older blessings; and Thorn, the head of security who saw everything as a threat. They gathered in a secure lab, with Ilara seated behind a wall of transparent, toxin-resistant shielding. Cashin stood beside the shield, his presence a silent command for cooperation. Tests were run. Her blood was analyzed. The results were terrifying. Ilara's blood contained a unique, self-replicating protein that acted like a potent acid on werewolf cellular tissue. It was triggered by adrenaline and cortisol, stress hormones. In a state of calm, her skin was merely warm. In fear or anger, it could become corrosive enough to melt steel. The source was genetic, a spontaneous mutation, but the lawmaster Kale offered a darker, more magical theory. He spoke of an ancient legend, the Scourge of Luna, a punishment from the moon goddess on a bloodline that betrayed her sacred bonds, a curse that manifested as a protective, destructive fire in the blood of an Omega, ensuring she could never be forcibly claimed or touched by an unworthy mate. "It is not a disease," Kale rasped, his old eyes gleaming. "It is a trial, a test of a true mate's worth, measured in his willingness to endure pain for the privilege of her touch." This reframed everything. Ilara was not flawed, she was potentially sacred, but biology cares little for sacredness. Dr. Aris delivered the harsh prognosis. The constant production of the toxin was metabolically exhausting. It was slowly killing her. Her lifespan, untreated, would be another 10 years at most. The stress of her captivity had accelerated the process. Furthermore, any attempt to surgically intervene or use traditional medicines risked triggering a catastrophic, full-body toxic release. The only documented suppressant, used crudely by the Silver Fang, was a cocktail of sedatives and emotional dampeners, the chemical equivalent of a stone cell. Cashin listened to all of this, his face a granite mask. When the last report was finished, he turned to the shielded room where Ilara sat, having heard every word. Her glow had dimmed, her face pale with a new kind of fear. "So," Cashin said, his voice echoing in the silent lab, "we have a curse that is also a biological time bomb, a mate bond that recognizes her but cannot physically comfort her without injury, and a clock ticking down. Is that the summary?" The experts nodded grimly. Cashin's lips thinned into a fierce smile. "Good, now we know the battlefield dismissed." Alone with Ilara, Cashin approached the shield. "You heard them," she said, her voice small. "I'm a dead woman, and I'll hurt you every day until then." "You heard the facts," Cashin corrected. "You did not hear my plan." He placed his unbandaged hand against the cool surface of the shield, aligning his palm with where hers rested on the other side. "The bond overrode the pain for a moment in that cell. That means our connection can influence your biology. We will use it. We will train it. You will learn to control your stress responses. I will learn to withstand the pain. We will find a middle ground, Ilara. I did not find you just to lose you." His certainty was a lifeline. Slowly, tentatively, she pressed her hand more firmly against the shield, mirroring him. It was not touch, but it was connection. The following weeks were a grueling regimen of controlled exposure therapy, supervised by a deeply skeptical Dr. Aris. For minutes each day, Cashin would remove his protective glove and take Ilara's hand. The burns were instantaneous and severe, but each time he pushed a little longer. He used the mate bond as an anchor, projecting calm, steadfast security through the link to counteract her instinctive fear. And slowly, infinitesimally, a change occurred. The duration before the burning began stretched from 1 second to 3, then to 5. The severity of the burns on Cashin's hands lessened, from 3rd degree to severe 2nd degree. Ilara's baseline glow began to dim. It was working, but progress in private did not equal acceptance in public. Word of the toxic queen spread through Cashin's empire. The elite of his pack, the alphas of allied territories, they all saw only a dangerous liability. A weak Omega whose very touch crippled their mighty king. Whispers of rebellion began to circulate. The most vocal critic was Cashin's own cousin, Marcus, a formidable alpha who had always been a loyal second. He confronted Cashin in the war room. "You are weakening yourself for her. Every burn is a vulnerability our enemies can exploit. She is a drain on your strength and a fracture in pack unity. The sensible thing is to keep her safe, but separate, a political mate in name only. Cashin's response was to summon the entire pack to the Great Hall. With Ilara at his side, clothed in a beautiful gown with long silken gloves, he addressed them. He did not hide the truth. He held up his scarred, still healing hands for all to see. These are not wounds of weakness, his voice boomed. They are proof of strength, the strength to claim what fate has given me no matter the cost. She is not my weakness, she is my trial. And any wolf who cannot see the difference is free to challenge me for this throne. Here, now. The silence was absolute. No one moved. Marcus lowered his gaze, defeated. In that moment, Cashin had publicly staked his entire authority on Ilara. He had made her safety inseparable from his own rule. It was the ultimate protection and the ultimate risk. But the greatest threat was not from within. It was from the shadows of the ruined Silver Fang Pack. Not all of Gregor's followers had been captured or killed. A faction led by Gregor's vengeful brother, Sealers, had gone to ground, and they wanted their weapon back. They had seen Cashin take her, they knew her value, and they believed she rightfully belonged to them. Sealers was not a brute like his brother. He was cunning. He had no army to launch a direct assault on the Obsidian Spire. Instead, he began a campaign of psychological warfare. He used old pack codes to send messages through underground channels, messages meant to reach Ilara's ears. They spoke of her duty to her birth pack. They spun lies that Cashin was only keeping her to harvest her blood for his own wars. They preyed on her deepest insecurities. The messages found their mark. Ilara's progress stalled. Her anxiety spiked. During a training session, overwhelmed by a fresh wave of fear and doubt, her control slipped. Cashin took her hand, and instead of the now familiar sear, her skin erupted in a flash of violent crimson energy. The pain was so intense it broke through his bond-anchored focus. He roared, stumbling back, his hand a raw, smoking ruin. Dr. Aris rushed in, her face grim. The damage is worse than ever. The tissue regeneration is being actively necrotized. My king, if this continues, you will lose the hand. That night, Ilara stood on her balcony, the gloves off, looking at her glowing hands under the moonlight. The bond in her chest was a knot of despair. She could feel Cashin's pain, a constant throbbing echo. Sealers' poisonous words echoed in her mind, "You are destruction. You will be the death of him." She looked back into the lavish room that felt like another, prettier cage. She looked at the mountain pass leading away from the spire. Cashin had given her everything. And all she gave him in return was agony and political strife. A terrible, familiar resolution settled over her. It was the logic of the stone cell: remove the dangerous thing to protect everything else. She had one skill, honed over 17 years, being invisible. Slipping away from the opulent prison would be harder than the stone one, but not impossible. Her heart shattered, but her mind was clear. She would leave. She would disappear back into the wild. It was the only way to save the Alpha who had been willing to burn for her. As the first light of dawn tinged the peaks pink, Ilara Sterling made a decision that would ignite a war. Ilara did not pack a bag. She owned nothing worth taking. She simply walked out of the royal suite as the first shift of dawn guards was changing, her movements a silent ghost of habit learned in a stone cell. She used servant passages, avoided the main courtyards, and slipped through a little-used maintenance gate that led into the raw wilderness of the Teton backcountry. The cold mountain air, once a shocking gift, now felt like a judgment. Each step away from the spire was a physical ache, the mate bond stretching thinner, a golden thread threatening to snap. But she kept walking. She had one objective: get far enough away that Cashin would be safe and Sealers would have no reason to target him. She was, after all, the asset. She would become a ghost again, this time by choice. She was wrong on every count. Cashin woke to the hollow silence of her absence an hour later. The bond didn't break, it screamed. It was a sensation of violent, wrenching emptiness, a cavity torn in his soul. He didn't need to check the room. He knew. A roar of pure, unadulterated fury shook the foundations of the Obsidian Spire. Within minutes, the entire fortress was on lockdown. Security feeds were scanned. They found her, a small figure in a borrowed grey coat, disappearing into the tree line. Beta Rohan presented the footage, his face grim. She's heading east into the high passes. The weather is turning. She won't survive a night out there. Cashin, his injured hand throbbing in a fresh cast, stared at the screen. His anger wasn't at her flight. It was at the world that had taught her this was her only option. Mobilize every tracker, ground the airships, close the territorial borders. No one enters or leaves. Find her, bring her home, unharmed. His voice was deadly calm, and find out who put this idea in her head. The answer came faster than expected. Sealers, watching from the shadows with a network of paid informants, had anticipated her flight. He hadn't wanted a siege on the impenetrable spire. He wanted a retrieval in the vulnerable wild. As Cashin's search parties fanned out, Sealers' own specialist team, dressed as rogue trappers, moved in. They used sonic emitters tuned to a frequency that caused disorientation in werewolves, scattering Cashin's perimeter scouts. They found Ilara just as a blizzard descended, huddled under a rocky overhang, her glow a faint beacon in the swirling white. She didn't fight when they approached. She was too cold, too heartbroken. The lead hunter, a woman with cold eyes, injected her with a powerful sedative. "The boss will be pleased," she murmured. "The weapon is coming home." Back at the spire, Cashin was presented with two pieces of devastating news simultaneously. The first, Ilara's trail had gone cold, blocked by the storm and evidence of sophisticated sonic interference. The second, Marcus, his disgruntled cousin, had made contact with Sealers. Dr. Aris, who had been monitoring Marcus's communications in secret, played the intercepted transmission. Marcus's voice was tense. "The king is emotionally compromised. The Omega is a destabilizing element. If you can guarantee her permanent containment, I can guarantee a change in leadership that would be favorable to a Silver Fang restoration." Sealers' chuckled reply was ice. "You'll get your throne, Marcus. Just deliver the spire's security schematics and stand aside." It was treason. Cashin sat in his war room, the silence thicker than the storm outside. His mate was gone, captured by a vengeful enemy. His bloodline had betrayed him. And his own hands were too injured to properly hold a weapon. The Alpha King had never been closer to total ruin. But Sealers had not accounted for the bond or for the change in his weapon. Ilara woke in a familiar nightmare, a stone room, but this one was smaller, colder, and deep underground in a derelict mining complex Sealers used as a base. The sedative wore off, leaving her groggy. Sealers himself came to see her. He was a sharp-faced, intelligent-looking man, nothing like his brutish brother. He looked at her with a clinical interest. "Welcome back, Ilara. Your vacation with the tyrant is over. It's time to get back to work." He gestured to a medical cart where ceramic ampules and lead-lined restraints waited. The old, paralyzing terror rose in her throat, but then something else rose with it, the memory of Cashin's voice. "You are not a weapon, you are my mate." The memory of his burned, steadfast hand. The fear didn't vanish, but it was now joined by a new, ferocious emotion, defiance. For the first time, she had something to lose, someone to fight for. When Sealers' doctor approached with the restraints, Ilara didn't cower. She focused. She thought of Cashin's calm projection through the bond. She imagined pulling her toxic energy inward, containing the storm. Her hands, which had begun to glow with anxious light, slowly dimmed. The doctor paused, surprised. "Her readings are dropping, she's suppressing it." Sealers frowned. "Impossible, stress triggers it. This is a high-stress environment." Ilara looked directly at him, her voice clear. "You're not my alpha. You don't get to decide what stresses me." In that moment, she realized the Lawmaster Kale might have been right. This wasn't just a random mutation. It was a test, and her body was responding to the strength she had found in the bond. She was learning control. Sealers, however, saw this not as a breakthrough, but as a malfunction. "Fine," he snapped. "If we can't draw it, we'll stimulate it." He ordered his men to bring in a captured warrior from Cashin's search party, a young wolf, beaten and bloody. "Hurt him," Sealers told Ilara, "or I will kill him slowly in front of you. Let's see how calm you stay then." It was a masterstroke of cruelty. The old Ilara would have shattered, her toxic release harming everyone. The new Ilara felt the panic surge, the red light flare at her fingertips, but she closed her eyes. She reached down the frayed, stretched, but still present bond. She didn't send fear. She sent a message, a single focused image of her location. The dark stone, the rusted mining cart tracks on the floor, the sound of dripping water. She poured every ounce of her will into it. "Find me." Then she opened her eyes and did the only thing she could. She threw herself not at the prisoner, but at the stone wall next to Sealers. She focused all the building, chaotic energy into her palms and slammed them against the rock. The stone didn't just scorch. It exploded outward in a shower of fragments and dust, collapsing a section of the wall and revealing a dark, narrow tunnel behind it, an old air shaft. The violent, directed release exhausted her, and her glow gutted out. But she had created chaos, and she had sent a signal. In the war room of the spire, Cashin jolted as if electrocuted. The bond, which had been a dull ache of distance, suddenly burned with a crystal-clear vision. He saw the stone, the tracks, the dripping water. He heard her silent plea. He was on his feet in an instant. "I have her location, the abandoned silver mines in the Eastern Valley." Rohan mobilized the entire attack force. Now, Marcus, who was in the room, paled. "My king, that's a full-scale assault, based on a feeling." "We should verify." Cashin turned on him, his eyes blazing pure gold. The civilized king was gone, only the primal alpha remained. "You are relieved of command, Marcus, for treason." Before Marcus could react, Cashin's loyal guards were on him. The fracture within the pack was now open war. The race was on. Cashin's forces descended on the mining complex like avenging angels. Silas's group, caught off guard by the speed and precision of the assault, mounted a desperate defense. Within the crumbling complex, all was bedlam. Silas, realizing his plan was unraveling, made a final, desperate gamble. He wouldn't let Cashin have her. If he couldn't possess the weapon, he would destroy it. He dragged a weakened Elara to a deep, unstable mining shaft. "If I can't have your power, no one will," he snarled, raising a blade. But he never got to strike. A black blur shot from a side tunnel. It was Cashin. He had come alone, ahead of his troops, driven by the bond. His injured hands were useless, but his body was a weapon. He tackled Silas, sending them both crashing to the ground near the shaft's edge. The fight was brutal and short. Cashin, hampered by his injuries, fought with feral desperation. Silas, a skilled fighter, landed several punishing blows. At a critical moment, he pinned Cashin and raised a silver dagger for a killing strike. Elara, watching from where she had fallen, felt a surge of pure protective rage. This man was trying to kill her mate. Her mate, Asterisk. The bond didn't just hum, it ignited. A wave of energy, not the chaotic red burn of fear, but a focused, brilliant gold light erupted from her. It wasn't hot. It was pure power. It slammed into Silas, not burning him, but throwing him bodily off Cashin and against the far wall with bone-crushing force. He slumped unconscious. The gold light lingered around Elara, then faded, leaving her gasping. Cashin stared, stunned. This was new. This was different. He stumbled to his feet and went to her, ignoring Silas. He didn't reach for her hands. He cupped her face, his thumbs on her cheeks, where her skin was warm but not toxic. The bond sang whole and strong. "You came," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "You heard me." "Always," he breathed. In that moment of profound connection, as they knelt amidst the rubble, the final, shocking revelation made itself known. Ancient Lawmaster Kale, reviewing the security footage of the gold energy surge, would later identify it. It wasn't just a defensive burst. It was the sign of the scourge of Luna transforming. The curse, when met with a mate's true self-sacrificing devotion, didn't vanish. It evolved. The destructive fire in the blood could become a protective, healing light. But the transformation required one last, impossible step. A full, unshielded mating bond, a physical union that would either kill Cashin or cure them both. The real trial was just beginning. The aftermath of the mine battle was a whirlwind of triage and justice. Cashin's forces secured the complex. Silas, broken and defeated, was dragged away in silver chains, destined for a council tribunal. The wounded were treated, and in the center of the chaos, Cashin refused to be separated from Elara for even a second. He held her close as they were flown back to the obsidian spire, her head tucked under his chin, the bond humming with a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and simmering, unanswered questions. The golden light she had emitted hung in the air between them, a mystery more profound than her curse. Back in the secure medical wing, the diagnostics began anew. Dr. Aris, her skepticism now replaced by wary awe, ran every test she could conceive. The results were staggering. The violent, acidic protein in Elara's blood was still present, but its behavior had changed. When she was calm and connected to Cashin, it lay dormant. When she felt protective rage, specifically rage aimed at a threat to her mate, it didn't trigger a corrosive burn. It converted into a different form of energy, a kinetic, concussive force of pure gold light. Kale, the Lawmaster, pored over ancient texts with trembling hands. He found it. The legend was true. The Scourge of Luna was not a punishment, but a trial by fire for a destined, powerful pairing. It was designed to incinerate unworthy touch. But if a mate proved his worth through self-sacrifice and unwavering devotion, the fire could be transmuted. It could become Luna's ward, a protective energy that drew its strength from the bond itself. The curse was never about isolation, Cale breathed, his eyes wide. It was about finding the one bond strong enough to transform it. But biology and magic, once again, presented a cruel catch. The transformation was not complete. The old, toxic pattern was still embedded in her cellular memory, triggered by fear or trauma unrelated to Cashin. The new, protective pattern was unstable. To make the change permanent, to fully integrate Luna's ward into her being, the bond needed to be sealed completely. In werewolf terms, this meant the full mating ceremony, a ritual bite, a physical and spiritual union that would irrevocably intertwine their souls and, to a lesser extent, their biologies. For any other couple, this was a moment of profound joy. For Cashin and Ilara, it was a potential death sentence. The act would require prolonged, unprotected skin-to-skin contact at a moment of intense emotional and physical vulnerability. If her fear spiked, if the old curse flared, the mating bite could deliver a lethal dose of toxin directly into Cashin's bloodstream. The very act meant to save her could kill him. The decision paralyzed the Spire's council. The political faction, led by those who had quietly agreed with Marcus, saw only the risk. They urged Cashin to accept the status quo, a bonded but physically separate life. "You have a queen who can project force fields," one elder argued. "That is weapon enough. Why gamble your life and the stability of the entire territory on a fairy tale?" The medical team, led by Dr. Aris, was divided. Some saw it as a necessary medical procedure to cure a fatal condition. Others saw it as reckless human experimentation. The choice, ultimately, was not theirs. It was Cashin's and Ilara. They retreated to the royal suite, a place that now felt like both a sanctuary and a cage. Ilara was despondent. "I can't ask you to do this," she said, staring at his hands, which were healing slowly but would always bear the scars of her touch. "After everything, I can't be the reason you die." Cashin took her gloved hands in his bandaged ones. "You are not asking, I am choosing. Listen to me, Ilara. A life where I can never truly hold you, where a moment of your fear could wound me, where your body is slowly killing itself, that is not a life. That is a slow death for both of us. I would rather face one moment of definitive risk than a lifetime of certain decay." He made his case not as a king, but as a mate. "The bond has guided us this far. It overrode the pain in the cell. It carried your call through miles of rock. It transformed your fear into a shield. I trust it. I trust *us**. His certainty was a rock in her shifting sea of doubt. He was offering not just his life, but his absolute faith. The ceremony was arranged for the night of the full moon, when magical energies were at their peak. It would be held in the Spire's most sacred space, the Moonstone Grove, an open-air atrium where the mountain's peak seemed to touch the stars. No crowd was permitted. Only essential personnel, Cale to officiate, Dr. Aris, and a full medical team standing by with crash equipment and antitoxins that likely wouldn't work, and Beta Rohan with security to ensure no interruptions. Ilara wore a simple, backless silk shift that would allow for the bite. Cashin wore only linen pants. There would be no barriers. As moonlight flooded the grove, they stood facing each other on the central stone dais. Ilara was trembling, but not from the cold. She was focusing every ounce of her will on the bond, on projecting calm, on locking the old, fearful patterns deep away. Cashin's face was a mask of serene determination. His golden eyes held hers, reflecting the moon. "I am ready," he said, his voice low. Cale began the ancient incantation. The air grew thick with potential. As the words rose to a crescendo, Cashin leaned in. This was the moment. He brushed his lips against hers, a first, chaste kiss that sent sparks through the bond. Then he slowly, deliberately moved his mouth to the juncture of her neck and shoulder. Ilara felt his breath, then the gentle pressure of his teeth. Her instinct was to stiffen, to fear the pain, to fear him. A flicker of red light danced at the edges of her vision. Panic clawed at her throat, but she looked inward at the golden thread connecting them. She didn't push the fear away. She handed it to him through the bond. "Take it, make it yours." Cashin, feeling the surge of her anxiety, didn't hesitate. He sank his canines deep. Agony for both of them. For Ilara, the pain of the claiming bite was sharp and bright. For Cashin, it was a wave of fire. Her blood, entering his mouth, was not the neutral substance of her calm state. It was hot, charged with the chaotic energy of the moment. He felt it sear his tongue, his gums, the lining of his throat. It was like swallowing lava. A groan was torn from him, but he did not pull away. He held on, his arms wrapping around her, anchoring them both as the ritual magic took hold. The world dissolved into sensation. Ilara felt the bond explode from a thread into a sunburst of golden light inside her soul. She felt his pain as her own, but she also felt his unwavering will, his love, his absolute refusal to let her go. It was this feeling, not calm, but accepted, shared agony, that became the catalyst. The red, corrosive energy in her blood, meeting the absolute self-sacrificing commitment in his, didn't fight. It transformed. Inside Cashin's body, the toxic proteins, exposed to the magic of a completed mate bond, unraveled and reconfigured. Inside Ilara, the biological command to destroy was rewritten into a command to protect. A pulse of pure, warm, gold light erupted from their connected bodies, flooding the Moonstone Grove. It didn't hurt, it healed. Scars on Cashin's hands shimmered and faded, the damaged tissue regenerating in seconds. The chronic inflammation in Ilara's organs soothed. The medical monitors, which had been screaming with alarm at Cashin's spiking toxicity levels, suddenly flatlined into healthy, normal rhythms. Dr. Aris watched, stunned, as the impossible data stabilized. The light faded. Cashin finally gently released the bite. He lifted his head, his mouth clean, unburned. He looked at Ilara, his eyes full of wonder. Then he kissed her, deeply, truly, with no barrier of pain between them. The change was permanent. In the days that followed, exhaustive tests confirmed it. Ilara's blood was no longer toxic. Under stress, it did not burn. When she or Cashin was threatened, it could still generate the concussive gold shield, Luna's ward, but it was now a controlled, conscious ability. The fatal countdown in her cells had stopped. She was cured. But the final, surprising detail, the one that would rewrite medical and magical texts, came weeks later. During a training accident, a young warrior suffered a deep, silver-poisoned wound that wouldn't heal. In desperation, Ilara placed her hands over the injury, focusing on protection, on healing. A soft gold light, gentler than the shield, emanated from her palms. When she lifted them, the wound was closed, the silver poison neutralized. Her blood, once only a weapon of destruction, now carried a trace, latent ability to heal. The scourge had not just been neutralized, it had been inverted. The ultimate trial had produced the ultimate reward. With their bond solidified and Ilara's condition resolved, Cashin turned to the final pieces of business, justice and governance. Marcus was tried for treason. Unlike Silas, who was handed over to the council for crimes against multiple pacts, Marcus was Cashin's to judge. Showing the mercy Ilara had inspired in him, Cashin did not order execution. He stripped Marcus of his title, his wealth, and his pack mark, then exiled him to the human world, a fate many wolves considered worse than death. The remaining Silver Fang loyalists were integrated or disbanded. The political dissent within Cashin's pack evaporated overnight. The story of the Alpha King who had burned for his mate and been rewarded with a queen who could wield light had spread like wildfire. It wasn't a story of weakness. It was the ultimate legend of strength. On a crisp autumn evening, 3 months after the mating ceremony, Cashin and Ilara stood together on their balcony. Below them, the territory was at peace. Ilara leaned back against Cashin's chest, his arms wrapped around her, her hands resting on his. No gloves, no bandages, just skin against skin, warm and safe. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly, looking out at the mountains. The quiet certainty of just being a king before all this. Cashin chuckled, the sound vibrating through her. "I was never just a king. I was a man waiting for a reason to be more. You were that reason. The fire, the fear, the gold light. It was all just the path to here." He turned her in his arms, his amber eyes soft in the twilight. "To this." He kissed her, a promise sealed not by magic, but by choice. The toxic Omega and the Alpha King had not just survived their impossible bond. They had redefined it, proving that the most powerful force in any world is not the ability to destroy, but the willingness to endure anything to protect what you love. Their reign, built on that foundation, was just beginning. Ilara and Cashin's story is more than a fantasy of fated mates and supernatural power. It is a blueprint for transformation. It asks the fundamental question, what do we do with the parts of ourselves that seem designed only to destroy? Do we hide them, weaponize them, or spend our lives in fear of their power? Ilara's journey provides the answer. The very thing that made her untouchable, the biological curse, the painful isolation, was the exact crucible that forged the strength of her bond. Without the fire in her blood, there would have been no test of Cassion's devotion. Without his willingness to be burned, there would have been no transformation into gold. Their tale resonates because it mirrors a universal human truth. We all carry our own versions of a toxic touch, traumas, flaws, past mistakes, or innate differences that make us feel isolated, dangerous to others, or unworthy of connection. The easy path is to lock that part away, to let it define us as a weapon or a victim. The harder, heroic path is what Cassion and Elara chose: to face it, to endure its pain, and to trust that within the heart of our deepest curse might lie our greatest gift, waiting for the right bond, the right perspective to unlock it. The Silver Fang pack saw only a weapon. Cassion saw a person, and in doing so he didn't just save her, he allowed her to become something entirely new. A queen, a healer, a partner. Their reign is built not on the fear her blood once inspired, but on the loyalty and awe her protection now commands. It is a powerful reminder that the value of a person is never defined by the utility others can wrench from them, but by the potential that love and courage can draw out. So what is the lingering question this story leaves us with? It is this: what in your life feels like a curse? What painful, difficult, or isolating part of your existence have you been taught to see only as a weakness or a flaw? Could it be, like the scourge of Luna, a trial in disguise, a hidden strength waiting for the right context, the right commitment, to be transformed into your own version of Luna's ward? The story of the toxic Omega and the Alpha King challenges us to look at our own prisons, our own painful touches, and ask not how to escape them, but what they might be preparing us to become. If this journey of impossible love, devastating sacrifice, and breathtaking transformation resonated with you, do me a huge favor. Let me know in the comments what part of Elara and Cassion's story hit home for you. Was it the moment he didn't let go, the discovery of the gold light? Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that our deepest pains can lead to our greatest strengths. And of course, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. We have so many more tales of fierce love, stunning twists, and hard-won victories waiting for you, because everyone deserves a story that makes them believe in the transformative power of enduring love. Thanks for watching.